Today on Real Ghost Stories Online, a group of workers were excited to land a well-paying job renovating an old funeral home, replacing carpets, painting, and updating the space. However, their excitement quickly faded when they began experiencing eerie apparitions, strange noises, and unexplained thuds. One of the workers, Andrew, shared his chilling experience. He, his father, uncle, and two cousins specialized in carpeting and painting. When they were hired to work on Hendrickson's funeral home, they saw it as just another job, albeit a high-paying one. When the supplies arrived, carpet, paint, and tiles, the workers asked the owners if they could stay in the funeral home overnight to complete the job faster. The owners agreed and handed them the keys. From the moment Andrew stepped inside, he felt uneasy. Still, they worked from morning until late at night, taking a break around 11 p.m. to rest in the funeral home's front room. Some lay on couches, while others rested on the floor, dozing off after the long day. A few hours later, Andrew woke up and noticed someone rushing up the stairs near the door. Assuming it was his Uncle Ted, he called out, but there was no response. Confused, he turned his head and was horrified to see Uncle Ted still lying beside him, fast asleep. That's when he realized whoever had just gone upstairs wasn't part of their group. Suddenly, loud thumping noises echoed from upstairs, like multiple people running and throwing themselves to the floor. The noise startled Andrew so much that he dropped his cigarette. He remained frozen, too scared to stand up, convinced something unseen was watching him. Then, just minutes after the noises stopped, he saw a shadowy figure wrapped in a white sheet, half draped as though they were naked underneath. The figure ran up the stairs, disappearing. Moments later, moans and groans came from the basement. Terrified beyond belief, Andrew tried to calm himself, but the strange occurrences escalated. He began seeing full apparitions running up and down the hallways near the staircase. The building, an old Victorian structure, had wide hallways, making the ghost's movements even more unsettling. At one point, he saw an elderly woman floating through the waiting room, slowly approaching him. That was the breaking point. Andrew refused to stay there any longer. He left immediately and went home for the night. The next morning, Andrew returned, determined to finish the job. 3 days later, the work was done, and he was relieved to leave the funeral home forever. Since then, he has never accepted another job involving a funeral home. He insists that everything he experienced was real. He wasn't drunk, high, or hallucinating. As a church-going man, he firmly believes spirits exist, though he's unsure why they linger or what they want. His advice to anyone who finds themselves in a funeral home overnight? Never sleep there alone. Kathy and the host discuss Andrew's story, wondering why he didn't wake up Uncle Ted or anyone else during the terrifying events. The thuds, the footsteps, and the moaning should have roused others, yet no one else seemed disturbed. Perhaps Uncle Ted was in a deep sleep, or maybe Andrew was the only one sensitive enough to witness the activity. Whatever the case, the hosts agree the idea of staying overnight in a funeral home is beyond unsettling. The speaker recalls an eerie event where someone left a funeral home, possibly omitting details about the unsettling experiences they had inside. They speculate that maybe the person told a friend, Ted, about the strange occurrences before leaving together. The conversation shifts to why spirits would haunt a funeral home, considering it's only a resting place for bodies. Logically, one would expect spirits to return to places of significance, like their homes or where they lived their lives. However, the speaker shares a personal experience of living in an old funeral home, which housed multiple entities, some protective and others malevolent. They recall instances of seeing orbs and unexplained disturbances, such as objects breaking. The discussion touches on how old funeral homes were often converted from houses, adding layers of unknown history to the hauntings. The conversation moves to the basement's eerie atmosphere, where many paranormal activities occurred. The speaker theorizes that the basement, once used to store carriages for transporting bodies before automobiles, may have been a gathering place for workers or others in the past. This leads to a phone call from a listener, Cindy, who shares her supernatural encounter. Cindy explains that she has always been fascinated by the paranormal, unlike her skeptical husband. One night, when she was heavily pregnant, her 2-year-old daughter, who usually slept soundly, suddenly began screaming. Her husband rushed in, accompanied by their Labrador retriever, only to return with their frightened dog shaking behind a chair. When pressed for details, he revealed that their daughter had pointed to the foot of her bed and said, "Daddy, there's a man standing there." Their dog, upon approaching the spot, tucked its tail, shook, and backed away in fear. Her skeptical husband, spooked by both his daughter's words and the dog's reaction, immediately took the child to sleep with them. That night, Cindy found it hard to sleep, as their normally fearless dog cowered behind a chair. They had lived in the house for years without previous incidents, leading Cindy to wonder if it could have been her grandfather visiting. Since then, nothing else has happened. The hosts discuss how pets and young children often sense paranormal presences more acutely than adults, and how their reactions can validate eerie experiences. They imagine how chilling it must have been for Cindy's husband to hear his daughter's words and witness the dog's fearful behavior. They also find it fascinating that some hauntings seem to be isolated incidents rather than recurring events. The discussion touches on the possibility that spirits may sometimes just pass through a location. They recall another story about a woman who encountered a ghost after witnessing a car accident, reinforcing the idea that some supernatural occurrences might be fleeting rather than permanent hauntings. A person shares a strange experience, wondering if spirits revisit places they once lived. They recall a story where someone saw a ghostly figure after a fatal car accident, speculating if spirits pass through their former homes before moving on. Another person suggests that perhaps a man who recently passed in the neighborhood was seen in an apartment, appearing briefly before fading away. Then, another story is introduced, involving pets. The storyteller recalls a night when they and their wife were relaxing in their recliners with their 3 small dogs sleeping on their lap. While reading the newspaper, they noticed a strange round black object hovering near their wife's feet. It was about the size of a large softball, filled with swirling black smoke that occasionally became transparent. As they nudged their wife, she reacted with shock. And suddenly, their dogs woke up and started barking wildly at the orb. The orb then moved across the room towards the hallway, and the dogs chased it through the doggy door into the backyard. It was late October, the night before Halloween, and already dark. Though the storyteller couldn't see anything outside, they heard the dogs barking and running around before returning, wagging their tails and seeming excited rather than afraid. The next morning, the storyteller experienced the same phenomenon. While shaving in the bathroom, they caught movement in the mirror. The same black orb drifting down the hallway. The dogs, still lying down and unable to see it, suddenly reacted as if they sensed its presence. As soon as the orb reached the doorway, they went wild, barking and bolting out the doggy door, chasing it again. A few minutes later, they returned, tails wagging as if they had been playing with it. The storyteller and their wife speculated that the orb might have been the spirit of their old dog, Stubby, a fearless rat terrier who passed away a year earlier and was buried in the backyard. Since this happened so close to Halloween, they wondered if it was a time of heightened spiritual activity. 4 years later, the orb has never appeared again, but if it was Stubby, they are comforted knowing the other dogs seemed happy to see it. After hearing the story, a discussion follows. One person firmly believes it was the ghost of Stubby, pointing out how the orb moved low to the ground and exited through the doggy door, just like the dog used to. Another person, however, thinks it was something extraterrestrial, a kind of monitoring device with intelligence. They debate whether the dogs would have reacted differently if it had been alien technology. While one remains convinced it was Stubby, the other insists it was a mysterious alien mechanism considering its ability to pass through doors. They humorously question why an advanced civilization would be interested in such an ordinary household rather than high-profile figures like the president or celebrities. In the end, they agree to disagree. One choosing the comforting idea of a beloved pet returning, the other sticking to the theory of an alien encounter. The segment ends with an invitation for listeners to share their own ghost stories by calling or writing in, along with details on subscribing for more paranormal content.